A titanium soul is not born, it is forged through the relentless pressure of life's most difficult and painful trials. Witness the incredible transformation of those who turned their struggles into a permanent shield of strength and honor. Click subscribe now and find the unbreakable power within yourself.
The cab smelled like pine air freshener and old coffee, and I almost didn't get in. It was a Tuesday night, late October. One of those nights where the cold sneaks up on you before you've had a chance to grab a heavier coat. I'd just finished a double shift at the hospital, where I work as an administrative coordinator, and my feet ached in the way they only do. After 8 hours of walking linoleum floors in shoes that looked professional, but felt like instruments of torture, I remember standing outside the main entrance, watching the rideshare app cycle through drivers, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether I had leftover pasta at home or whether I'd have to settle for cereal. The car that pulled up was a dark gray sedan, a little older than the photo in the app. The driver was a man, somewhere in his 60s, heavyset, with silver hair cropped close to his head. He had the kind of face that looked like it had seen a lot, not unkind, but serious, tired in a permanent sort of way. I got in. He confirmed my name. I said yes. He pulled away from the curb. We were maybe 4 minutes into the drive when he spoke. "You work at Mercy General?" I looked up from my phone. "Yeah. Why?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes found mine in the rearview mirror and held there for just a beat too long. "How well do you know your sister?" Everything in my body went still. I don't know how to explain the specific kind of cold that moved through me in that moment. It wasn't fear exactly. Not yet. It was more like that half second before you slip on ice, when your brain registers that something has gone very wrong before the rest of you catches up. "Excuse me?" He reached to the passenger seat beside him, picked up a phone, not his, different case, cracked screen, and held it back toward me without turning around. "She asked me to give you this. Said don't call out. Don't say her name. Just listen." My hand was shaking when I took it. The call was already connected. I could hear breathing on the other end, shallow and quick, the way my sister breathes when she's trying not to cry. "It's me," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't hang up, don't say anything loud. Just listen to what I'm telling you." "What's happening?" I said. And I heard my own voice come out strange, thin, like I was hearing it from across a... "Where are you?" "I'm okay right now, I'm okay." A pause. "But I need you to trust me. I need you to not go home tonight." "What? Why, what's..." "There's a man," she said. "He was parked outside your building when I drove by an hour ago. Dark truck, no plates. I know what that means, I know who sent him." I felt the air leave my lungs. Because here's what I haven't told you yet. Here's the part that makes everything that came next make sense, even though nothing about it felt like it made sense at the time. My sister. 2 years younger than me, the one who still calls me on my birthday at exactly midnight, who shows up with soup when I'm sick, and never once asks for anything in return, had been living under a shadow for almost 8 months. A shadow with a name, though I won't say it here. A man she'd been married to for 6 years before she finally found the courage to leave. A man who had, in those 6 years, made very clear that he considered her his property, and that property didn't get to walk away. She'd tried the restraining order. It had been violated twice. She'd tried moving. He'd found her. She'd tried going to the police, and the detective who took her statement had looked at her in a way that told her exactly how seriously he was taking it, which was not very seriously at all. She'd been staying with a friend, someone he didn't know about, keeping her head down, and she'd been careful, so careful, to stay away from me, because she knew that if he was watching her, and watching her connections, the last thing she wanted was to lead him to my door. But something had changed. Something had happened that week that I didn't know about yet, and that's what she was trying to tell me now, from wherever she was hiding, through a cab driver I'd never met, on a cracked phone that wasn't his. "The man outside your building," I said slowly. This is because of..." "Yes." She cut me off before I could say his name. "I think he knows I've been in contact with you. I don't know how. I've been so careful, but..." Her voice broke, just for a second, and she pulled it back. "It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you can't go home. Not tonight." "Then where do I go?" "The driver knows," she said. "I trust him. He's a good man. He's going to take you somewhere safe. Just go with him, please. I'll explain everything when I see you." The call ended. I sat there in the back of that cab with a stranger's phone in my hand and the city moving past the windows in streaks of orange streetlight, and I tried to remember how to breathe. The driver was watching me in the mirror again. "Her name is Angie," I said. "My sister. She told me not to say it, but I don't." I stopped. "How do you know her?" "My daughter went to school with her," he said. "A long time ago. She called me 3 hours ago, told me she needed help, told me to pick you up and not let you go home." He paused. "My name is Walt. That's all you need to know for now." I looked at him for a long moment. A man named Walt in a gray sedan. My sister's voice on a cracked phone telling me to trust him. "Okay," I said. "Okay, Walt." He nodded once and turned his eyes back to the road. I want to say I was calm. I want to say I handled it with some kind of grace, the way people do in movies. Collected. Strategic, quietly brave. But the truth is my hands didn't stop shaking for the next 20 minutes. And at some point, I realized I was gripping the door handle so hard my knuckles had gone white, as if I was prepared to throw myself out of a moving vehicle if things went any further sideways. Walt drove us out of downtown, away from my neighborhood, further north than I usually went. He didn't play music. He didn't make small talk. He just drove, and occasionally his eyes would flick to the rearview mirror. Not to look at me, but to check what was behind us. I noticed that. I noticed that he was checking whether we were being followed. "Are we?" I asked. "Followed," he said. "Not anymore. Not anymore." "There was a truck," I said. "It's gone now." I took a different route. I pressed my back against the seat and stared at the ceiling of the car. There was a crack running along it that someone had tried to fix with what looked like electrical tape, and for some reason that detail made me want to cry. Everything felt very small and very large at the same time. "Walt," I said. "I need you to tell me what my sister told you. All of it. Not the version where you're protecting me from information. Everything." He was quiet for a moment. "She said she found something," he said finally, "at her old house. When she went back to get the last of her things, there was a folder. She thinks he left it out on purpose, or maybe he just got careless, but either way she found it. Financial records," she said. "Transfers. A lot of them, going back 4 years. To where?" She didn't say specifically, but she said it was enough that, if the right people saw it, he'd have a lot more to worry about than a divorce. Walt's jaw tightened. "And she thinks he knows she found it." I closed my eyes. My sister was 29 years old. She had a degree in early childhood education that she'd put on hold because her husband hadn't thought it was practical. She had a laugh that came out of nowhere, sudden and real, the kind that made everyone around her laugh too. She made the best chicken soup I'd ever tasted, from scratch every single time. And she could never explain how because she never measured anything. And she had spent the last 8 months being afraid, and she had never, not once, asked me to fix it, because she knew I would have, and she knew what that might cost me. I was done letting her carry it alone. "Where are we going?" I asked. "A motel out past Route 9. Not a nice one. That's the point, nothing he'd think to look for. Your sister is already there." I sat up straighter. "She's there now?" "She called me from there." 15 minutes later, Walt pulled into the parking lot of a place called the Lakeview Inn, which had no visible lake, and nothing that could generously be described as a view. The sign had 2 burned-out letters. The parking lot was half gravel, half asphalt, and a vending machine near the office glowed blue in the dark. Before I got out of the car, I turned to Walt. "I don't know how to thank you," I said. "I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this." He shook his head slowly. "Years ago when my daughter was going through something hard, someone helped her. A stranger." He looked at me directly for the first time. "You don't pay that back, you just pay it forward." I wanted to say something else but I didn't have the words, so I just nodded, and got out and walked toward room 7, where a thin line of light was visible under the door. I knocked twice. The door opened, and there was my sister. Smaller than I remembered somehow, even though I'd seen her 3 weeks ago. She had dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a knot, and she was wearing a sweatshirt I recognized as one I'd given her 4 Christmases ago. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in months because she hadn't. She also had tears running down her face before I even stepped inside. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry I pulled you into this." I didn't say anything. I just walked in and put my arms around her, and she let me. And we stood there like that for a long moment, while the vending machine hummed outside. and the highway made its steady, distant sound. "Stop apologizing," I said into her hair. "Just to tell me everything." She did. It took almost 2 hours. She told me about the folder, a manila envelope, tucked into the back of a filing cabinet she hadn't been able to take when she left because he'd been there watching. She'd gone back that Tuesday morning, when she knew he had a meeting he couldn't miss, and she'd found it. Transfers, wire transfers, going back to 2019. Money moving from an LLC that was technically in her name, which she'd known nothing about, into accounts she couldn't trace without help. Amounts that started small and got larger. The kind of thing that would make a forensic accountant's eyebrows go up. The kind of thing that would make a federal investigator's eyebrows go up. "He put it in your name," I said. She pressed her lips together. He needed someone he controlled. The word controlled hung in the air between us. "He realized the folder was gone," she said. "I don't know when exactly, but by Friday, he'd called twice and texted 7 times, which he never does. That's when I drove by your building and saw the truck. You should have called me immediately." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "I was scared that if I called you directly, whoever was watching would see it. I didn't want to use my phone, so I had to think. And I thought of Walt." She almost smiled. "He drove me to my first middle school dance. Did I ever tell you that? His daughter was my best friend in 6th grade. I still had his number in an old email." I thought about the specificity of that the thread connecting us to safety that night ran all the way back to a 6th grade best friendship, to a man who'd once driven 2 little girls to a school gym decorated with streamers. "What's in the folder?" I asked. "Specifically," she told me. The specific amounts, the LLC name, the account routing numbers she'd photographed before she put the folder back exactly as she'd found it. She'd sent the photos to an email address he didn't know about, and then she'd sat on that information for 4 days, trying to figure out what to do with it. "I know someone," I said. "From the hospital. She's a patient advocate, but her background is legal. She used to work with a firm that did financial crimes. She'll know who we need to talk to." My sister looked at me. "You think this is enough?" "I think it's enough to start with. And I think that's what he's afraid of." She was quiet for a moment then. "He's not going to stop. Even if we take this somewhere. He has people. He has resources. He's not just going to." "I know," I said. "But right now he thinks he has leverage because he thinks you're alone and you're scared and you don't have options." I looked at her directly. "You're not alone. And we're going to make sure he knows that." That night, we slept in a motel room with scratchy blankets and a heater that clicked every 20 minutes. My sister fell asleep before I did, which she hadn't done in months. She told me later that it was the first time in a long time she'd felt safe enough to really sleep. I lay there in the dark and listened to the heater click and thought about the LLC in her name, and the man who'd put it there, and the 6 years she'd spent slowly becoming smaller, while he became more sure of himself. I thought about how easy it is to convince someone that they don't have options. How that's not even a lie, exactly. It's more like a lens that gets placed over someone's vision, slowly, so carefully they don't notice until they can't see past it anymore. And then one day something cracks the lens. A folder left in the wrong place. A cracked phone in the back of a cab. The next morning, I called my contact from the hospital. Her name was Rosalind. Actually no, her name was Christine, Dr. Christine Okafor, though she'd left clinical work years ago and had gone into advocacy because, as she put it, she was tired of treating symptoms and ignoring causes. She was one of those people who seemed to know exactly one person in every field that mattered, and she listened to everything I told her without interrupting, and when I was done she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Okay," she said. "I know someone at the FBI field office. White collar. She's going to want to see everything your sister has." "When?" "I'm going to text you an address. Can you be there by noon?" We were there by 11:40. I won't go through all of it. The details of what came next belong to my sister, not to me, and she'll tell her own story when she's ready. What I will say is that the woman we met that morning took one look at the photographs my sister had taken, and picked up her phone and made a call. And the nature of that call told us more than anything she said directly. She wasn't dismissing us. She wasn't doing the thing that the local detective had done, the slow nod that means I'll file this and never look at it again. She was already working. On the drive back to the motel to get our things, my sister was quiet for a long time. I thought he was untouchable, she said finally. I don't know. I thought I was stuck. You weren't stuck, I said. You just didn't have the right people around you yet. She looked out the window. Do you think it's going to work? I thought about that honestly, the way she deserved. I think there are no guarantees, I said. I think this is the beginning of something that's going to take time and probably get harder before it gets easier. I think he's going to try things. I paused. But I also think he made a mistake. He put that account in your name because he thought you'd never look. He was wrong about who you are. She didn't say anything for a moment. You know what he used to tell me, she said. That I was lucky to have someone like him. That I wouldn't know what to do without him. She shook her head slowly. The way you do when something isn't funny, but there's nothing else to do with it. I do, though. Know what to do. I've known the whole time. I just needed to stop listening to his version of me. I reached over and squeezed her hand. We didn't go back to my apartment that night, or the night after. There were arrangements to make, things to put in place. Christine connected us with a domestic violence organization that specialized in exactly these kinds of situations. People who understood that sometimes the danger doesn't look like a bruise, but a bank account, a controlled LLC, a folder of transfers that made a spouse's existence legally and financially entangled in things she never agreed to. They helped us find a short-term place to stay. They helped my sister connect with an attorney who took one look at her documentation and agreed to represent her. They knew the right people to notify, the right way to document everything, the right questions to ask. 3 weeks later, my sister's name was no longer attached to any account she hadn't opened herself. 6 weeks after that, there were 2 federal investigators who had questions for her former husband that had nothing to do with their divorce. I'm not going to tell you it was easy. I'm not going to tell you. She stopped looking over her shoulder overnight, because she didn't, and the fear that gets built into someone over years doesn't dissolve in weeks, no matter how good the outcome looks on paper. There were nights she called me at 2 in the morning, not because anything had happened, but because the absence of the constant threat felt so unfamiliar. It was almost its own kind of fear. Like a body that doesn't know how to stop racing. But she called me. That's the part that matters. She called me, and I picked up, and we talked until she felt steady again. Somewhere in the middle of one of those nights, she said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. I kept trying to protect you from it, she said. From all of it. I thought that was love, keeping you away from the mess I'd made. You didn't make it, I said. I know that now. A pause. But also, I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like that, like someone who'd let it happen. Angie. I know it doesn't work that way. But that's what it felt like. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. About how shame does exactly what it's supposed to do. It isolates. It tells you that your mess is yours alone. That asking for help is weakness, that you are too far gone for anyone else's hands to reach. It's an extraordinarily efficient system, once it gets going. What broke it wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't my sister finding some hidden reservoir of strength she didn't know she had. It was a folder left in the wrong place, and an old phone number in an old email, and a man named Walt who drove a gray sedan and once took 2 sixth graders to a school dance. It was a network of small ordinary things that turned out, under the right circumstances, to be a lifeline. Walt, for what it's worth, declined to accept any payment. My sister sent him a plant, a large, very green succulent that she said required minimal care, because she figured he was a low-maintenance kind of person. He texted her a photo of it on his kitchen windowsill 3 weeks later with a thumbs-up emoji, which is the most Walt thing I could possibly imagine. I went back to my apartment eventually. The truck was gone. Had been gone. It turned out, since the morning after the cab ride, which Christine later told us made sense. When you realize the person you're watching has vanished, you pull back and reassess. You don't want to be visible when you're not sure what the other side knows. Standing in my own kitchen for the first time in almost a week, I made coffee and looked out the window at the street below. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did. The bodega on the corner. The woman who walked her enormous dog every morning at 7:15 regardless of weather. The maple tree that was mostly orange now, losing leaves in slow batches. Everything, the same, except that I knew something I hadn't known before. That the life I went back to every night after work, the comfortable smallness of it, could be disrupted in an instant. That there were people I loved who carried things I didn't know about, because they were trying to protect me from the weight. That love, sometimes, looks like keeping someone in the dark. But protection that isolates isn't protection. It's just a different kind of alone. My sister and I talk every day now. Not long. Sometimes just a text. Sometimes a call on the commute home. She started the education program she'd put on hold. She is learning, slowly, what it feels like to make decisions that no one reviews or approves or quietly undermines. She told me last month that she bought a couch she picked entirely by herself, and that it was a color he never would have allowed in the house, and that she sits on it every morning with her coffee and feels, she said, like a person who exists in a space that is entirely her own. I cried a little when she told me that, not the sad kind. I think about that cab ride sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. The pine air freshener, the city going past the windows, the cracked phone heavy in my hand, the moment I had to decide whether to trust a stranger. Because the person I trusted most in the world had asked me to. I think about how close it came to going differently, how easily I could have told Walt to pull over, gotten out, gone home, how the thread connecting my sister to safety was thinner than anyone knew. And I think about the thing she said that one night, the one I can't stop hearing. I just needed to stop listening to his version of me. I hope she never has to fight to remember that again. But if she does, if there's ever a moment when the old voice gets loud again, the one that told her she was lucky, that she was nothing without him, that she'd gotten herself into a mess she didn't deserve to be rescued from. I'll be there. We fight together. That's not a thing I said once and meant in the moment. That's the whole point. That's what it means.